Something shifted last night. You felt it. Not dramatically, not in a way you could easily explain to someone who wasn't there, but something moved. In you, between you, in that space that exists between two people, when something unspoken is louder than anything being said. You felt it the way you always feel things with this particular person, in your chest before your mind has finished forming the thought. A warmth that arrived without permission, a recognition that moved through you like a current you didn't turn on and couldn't turn off. And now you are here, turning it over quietly, wondering what it meant, wondering if they felt it too, wondering whether to trust what your whole body registered as real. Perhaps this connection has a complicated history, distance between you, time that passed, things that were left unfinished. Perhaps they are someone you weren't supposed to still think about, someone the rational part of you has tried to file neatly away, and yet here you are again, undone by a single moment that lasted no longer than a breath. You are not imagining this. That is the first thing I want you to hear. And tonight, I want to show you something about what is actually happening between you. Not just emotionally, but at a level of psychological depth that will change the way you understand every connection that has ever felt this undeniable. Carl Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human soul who ever lived, spent his life investigating precisely this phenomenon. The connections that the rational mind cannot dismiss, the bonds that persist beyond logic, beyond circumstance, beyond every reasonable attempt to explain them away. He did not treat these experiences as romantic illusions or wishful thinking. He treated them as data, as evidence of something operating at a level far beneath ordinary consciousness. The concept that will anchor everything I share with you tonight is synchronicity, which Jung defined not as coincidence, but as the meaningful convergence of inner experience and outer event that cannot be explained by simple cause and effect. A connection that two people feel simultaneously, without coordination, without visible reason, arriving in the same moment from two separate interiors. This, Jung would say, is not accident. It is the unconscious speaking in the only language it has, through what simply, inexplicably, undeniably occurs. Jung observed that certain connections between people do not follow the ordinary logic of proximity or shared history or deliberate effort. They follow a different logic entirely, the logic of the unconscious, which moves beneath the surface of everything we think we know about how relationships form and what makes them last. He observed that the psyche is not a closed system, that two people who share a genuine psychological resonance can affect each other across distance, across silence, across time, not through any mystical mechanism, but through the deep architecture of what it means for two unconscious worlds to have genuinely recognized each other. And that recognition, once it has happened, does not simply unhappen because circumstances change. You know this, not as an idea, as something you have lived. Jung observed that what most people call an inexplicable connection is almost always the surface expression of something much older and much deeper. A meeting not just of two personalities, but of two psychological structures that carry complementary material. Not perfectly complementary, not without friction, but resonant in a way that neither person fully chose and neither person can fully undo. This is why certain people stay with us long after they are gone. Not because we are weak, not because we are confused, not because we have failed to move on correctly, but because something real was exchanged, something genuine was seen. And the psyche, which keeps its own ledger with extraordinary fidelity, does not close an account simply because the surface circumstances have changed. What you felt last night was not a relapse. It was not wishful thinking dressed up as intuition. It was the registration of something that continues to be true, even when everything around it has tried to say otherwise. Now here is what you may not have considered. If you felt it, they felt it too. Not necessarily in the same form. not necessarily with the same clarity, not necessarily in a way they would know how to name or were comfortable sitting with. But the resonance between two people who share a genuine unconscious connection does not operate in only one direction. Jung's framework is precise about this. Projection, recognition, deep psychic resonance. These are never entirely one-sided. There is always a receiving structure in the other person, something in their unconscious that is tuned to exactly what you carry. Otherwise, the connection would never have formed in the first place. Which means that whatever moved through you last night moved through something in them as well. Perhaps they are not looking at it directly. Perhaps they are moving away from it, the way someone moves away from a light that is brighter than they are ready for. But it moved. Something in them was touched again by the reality of what exists between you. And somewhere in you, you already knew that. Not as a hope, not as a wish, as something quieter and more certain than either of those things. Here is the paradox that sits at the center of all of this. The connections we cannot explain are the ones that are most real. This sounds like it should be the other way around. We are trained to trust what we can verify, what we can account for, what we can trace step by step from cause to effect, too. And yet Jung would say, and the entire depth of his clinical work would say alongside him, that the connections which defy rational explanation are not defying reality. They are pointing toward a layer of reality that rational explanation was never equipped to reach. When two people share a bond that persists beyond every practical reason for it to exist, when they feel each other's movements across distance, when a single moment of proximity reignites something that weeks or months of separation had seemed to cool. This is not irrationality. This is the unconscious operating according to its own laws. Laws that are no less real for being invisible. Laws that have been at work in human beings for as long as human beings have existed. Jung would point here to the concept of the collective unconscious, the deep layer beneath the personal unconscious, where the most fundamental patterns of human experience reside. Certain connections activate material at this level. They touch something that is not just about these two particular people in this particular moment, but about something ancient, something archetypal, something that the human soul has always recognized as significant. This is why these connections feel larger than ordinary relationships, why they carry a weight that seems disproportionate to their visible history, why letting go of them feels like losing something that was never just a person, but also a kind of inner knowing, a particular way of seeing yourself, a version of aliveness that seems to exist only in that specific relational field. That is real. All of it is real. And the fact that it is real means it deserves to be understood with more care and more precision than the ordinary language of romantic longing can provide. Let me show you the shape of how this moves, the phases through which a connection like this passes, and why what happened last night is not an ending, but a particular kind of threshold. The first phase is what you might call the original recognition. This was the moment, perhaps a long time ago now, when something between you first registered as significant, not necessarily in a way that was immediately comfortable or clean. Sometimes these recognitions arrive with a quality of disruption, of being seen in a way you hadn't prepared for, of finding that someone else's presence does something to your interior landscape that you cannot fully account for or control. In this phase, both of you felt something that was larger than the context could easily hold. A charge. A familiarity that had no established history to justify it. A sense, perhaps frightening, perhaps thrilling, almost certainly both, that this person was going to matter. Your unconscious registered the resonance before your conscious mind had even begun to form its first impression. And once the unconscious registers something as significant, it does not easily revise that assessment. The second phase is the complication, the point at which circumstances, defenses, fears, and the ordinary difficulties of two human beings trying to exist near each other began to create interference in what had been so clear. This is the phase that most people spend the longest in, and the one that generates the most confusion and pain. Because in this phase, the connection does not go away, but it becomes surrounded by things that make it harder to see cleanly. Misunderstandings that took on more weight than they should have. Distance, emotional or physical, that one or both of you created as a form of protection. Silence that was meant to be temporary and somehow extended into something that started to feel permanent. And through all of it, that original signal still present underneath, persistent, refusing to be entirely buried by everything that had accumulated on top of it. You may recognize this phase as the one where you spent significant energy trying to convince yourself that what you felt was not real, not sustainable, not worth the complexity it brought with it. And you may also recognize that this convincing never fully worked. The third phase is the recurrence, which is precisely what happened last night. A moment of proximity, real or otherwise, that cleared enough of the interference for the original signal to come through again with its original strength. This is not the connection reviving. It never died. This is the connection reasserting itself through a gap in the accumulated distance, the way light comes through when something that was blocking it shifts. These recurrences are not accidents. Jung's framework around synchronicity would say that the timing of such moments carries its own meaning, that they occur when something in one or both people's interior landscape has shifted enough to allow the resonance to surface again. When last night happened, something in you had changed, or something in them had changed, or something in the space between you had changed. And the connection, which had been waiting with extraordinary patience, moved through the opening. The fourth phase, the one you are in right now, is the threshold of understanding. This is the phase that matters most, because this is where you decide what to do with what you know, not what to do about them, not how to reach out or whether to reach out or what to say if you do. Those questions come later, if they come at all. The question of this phase is internal. It is the question of what this connection has been trying to show you, not just about them, but about yourself. But here is what Jung would add. And this is the part that most people skip, because it is harder than anything that came before it. Every profound connection activates something in us that belongs to us, not to the other person. The qualities you see in them that move you most deeply, the way their presence makes you feel more real or more alive or more yourself. This is not only about them. It is a projection, not in the dismissive sense of the word, not a false attribution, but in Jung's precise sense. Your unconscious is showing you, through this other person, something about your own soul that is trying to come forward. What do you see in them that feels almost painfully beautiful? What quality of theirs makes you feel the most seen? What is it about their presence that returns something to you that feels like it has been missing? These are not questions about them. They are questions about you, about the parts of yourself that this connection has been holding up as a mirror. And the deepest work of this moment, deeper than any decision about reaching out, deeper than any attempt to understand their feelings or their choices, is the work of recognizing what this connection has been asking you to reclaim in yourself. Because here is what becomes possible when you do that work. You stop being someone who is waiting for this connection to resolve in a particular external way in order to feel whole. You begin to carry, inside yourself, what you have been receiving from this resonance. And paradoxically, always paradoxically, in the language of the unconscious, that internal fullness changes the nature of what is possible between you. Not as strategy, as simple psychological truth. What happened last night was real. The feeling in your chest was real. The shift you both moved through was real. And your soul's recognition that this connection carries meaning. That is perhaps the most real thing of all. You are not chasing something that doesn't exist. You are not constructing significance out of nothing. You felt something last night that has been true for longer than last night, that will remain true regardless of what either of you does or doesn't do next. The unconscious does not manufacture meaning. It only reveals what is already there. The pain of a connection like this, the not knowing, the distance, the moments of almost followed by silence, that pain is real. Do not let anyone tell you it is imagined. It points to something genuine, something that matters at the level where the most important things in a human life are decided, and that something is yours. Whatever happens between you and this person, however this story continues or doesn't continue, however they move toward you or away, what this connection has opened in you cannot be closed again. You have been changed by it. You are more yourself for having felt it. The soul does not choose its resonances randomly. And a soul that has been truly recognized, even once, even imperfectly, even across all the distance and all the complication, knows the difference between what was real and what was not. Last night was real. You were right to feel it. And wherever it leads, you are not alone in what you carry. Tell me one thing in the comments. Did something shift for you recently with someone you thought you had moved past? Just a word. Just a yes. I read everyone. If this reached something true in you tonight, share it with someone who is quietly carrying the same thing. Subscribe for teachings that go this deep every week. You felt something real. That matters. That has always mattered. Sonnet 4:6.